At the time, it was a recent acquisition of the Österreichische Galerie, and they lent it, is this painting of a woman by Klimt. And this is 1894. So there's actually 4 years difference between these two paintings. The Kaufmann is 4 years later. But and this painting is just prior to Klimt's great breakthrough in the year of the Vienna Secession, 1897. So it's just at the point where he's beginning to find himself as an artist. And one of the things that struck me about looking at these two paintings was, in fact, the stylistic similarities. Both of them have a meticulous, almost photographic observation of the subject, but this is combined with really quite abstract elements. You've got this the use of the carpet behind the woman in black on the left hand side, and the tapestry behind the rabbi, and these very, very strong contoured dark shapes against a light background. So stylistically, these two pictures are really quite similar. So there is a moment in the mid 1890s when these two artists are quite close. That changes because Klimt changes. In the late 90s, early 1900s, in the early 1900s, he goes into his gold period. And then, of course, later, after 1907, he's working in a very painterly way. So Klimt moves on, but Kaufmann doesn't. His style is now fixed, and this is the style that he will use for the rest of his career. Here, this little painting on the left hand side, of course, you can't tell how big it is from the image on the screen. It's actually tiny. It's almost a miniature of a very young girl. It's from the same period by Klimt in the early to mid 1890s. And a painting by Kaufmann on the right hand side, also quite small. And again, I see interesting similarities between the two. One of the things I like about both these pictures is the absence of sentimentality. So many 19th century pictures of children or young people are kind of really sickly sweet. And I don't think that is the case here. There's a really kind of cool objectivity and observation of these young girls by both artists. Now, Isidor Kaufmann was born in the city of Arad, which is now in Romania. It was when he was born there in 1853. It was in Hungary and obviously part of the Habsburg Empire. And his dates, very interesting, 1853. So Gauguin on the left-hand side, 1848, he's born 5 years earlier. Van Gogh, interestingly, was born the following week in 1853. He was born 8 days after Isidor Kaufmann, and Klimt, who I've been comparing him to, is 9 years younger. And Chagall, who in a way the spirit of Chagall sort of hangs over this lecture, was a generation later. He's born 34 years later. Now, here is a picture of Isidor Kaufmann in 1906. And of course, you can tell an awful lot about him from the way he's dressed. When I first started teaching at the London Jewish Cultural Centre, a young actress was sent to me and put in my class. She was actually playing one of the sisters of the pianist in Polanski's movie, The Pianist. And he had sent her to the London Jewish. She wasn't Jewish, and he sent her to the London Jewish Cultural Centre to mug up on the background of what a Jewish family in Poland would have been like in the early 1900s. And weirdly, I don't know why they thought of it, they sent her to my class because I didn't have, although I was really getting into all things Jewish, I didn't have a Jewish background. But in my class was a wonderful Hungarian lady called Truda Levy, who was a very, very dear friend. So this girl came up to me at the end of the lecture, and she asked me to help her. And I said, look, I don't think I can help you, but I want to introduce you to my friend Truda Levy, who was a survivor and amazing woman. And this girl, Julia, went to Trudy, and Trudy said, well, can you show me a picture of the family of the pianist? And she did, and she took one look at the way they were clothed, and she said, well, of course. Yeah, the girl said to her, what kind of music would they listen to? Would they listen to klezmer? And Truda looked at them and she said, these girls are wearing their own hair, and they're wearing short sleeve dresses. She said they're totally assimilated, and there's no way that they would have been listening to klezmer. So look at this picture. This man is dressed in a very dapper, totally Europeanized way. His father was a captain in the Austro-Hungarian army. So he was also, of course, he came from an assimilated background. And I want to emphasize this very much because I think it's an important fact in this lecture, that in this exploration of Hasidic traditions and Jewish religious beliefs, he was exploring these things and investigating them in a way as an outsider. It was way back in his family that it would have been part of their lives. And so this is a big difference, of course, between him and Chagall. And here you can see Chagall, Rabbi on the left, and Isidor Kaufmann on the right-hand side. They're coming at this subject matter really from very different directions. Now, he developed an artistic vocation, and this is a very poor reproduction, I'm afraid, of a picture long since destroyed in the Nazi period. But this is a copy of an old master image of Moses that he made as a young man. And it was put in a shop window in Arad, and people noticed it, and they thought that he might have talent, and money was raised. And he was sent to Vienna to study at the academy in Vienna. This is the building, it's still there. And he studied there for 1 year, but at the end of that year, it was deemed that he had not made sufficient progress, and he was rejected from the academy. And he then, so he's in Vienna. Here we are in Vienna. Vienna, 1875. What's it like? Of course, we're midway through the reign of Franz Josef, who you see on the left-hand side, who'd started off as a fierce reactionary, but became increasingly liberal. And he was a great believer in inclusiveness. And of course, he was a great philo-Semite. He was friendly towards the Jews. And unlike the notorious mayor of Vienna around 1900, this is Karl Lügner on the right-hand side, who got elected as mayor of Vienna on an anti-Semitic ticket. I think it's only in the last year, amazingly, fantastically, belatedly, that the section of the Ringstrasse, which has always been known as the Lügner Ringstrasse, changed. His name was taken out of it. His statue is still there on the Ringstrasse. Nobody's got around to toppling this statue yet, despite all the spate of statue toppling we've had recently. So anyway, after being rejected initially from the academy, he takes himself off and he studies privately with an artist called Josef Aigner, who is a kind of respectable, successful academic artist. And this is a portrait by him on the left-hand side. And I think he learned a lot from him. This is a commissioned portrait of a banker by Isidor Kaufmann some years later. But I think this kind of rather dry, slightly academic, very competent technique is something that he learned from Eigner. So having spent a year with him, he then goes back to the Vienna Academy, and he studies with another artist, another Josef Trenkwald. This is a painting by Josef Trenkwald, who was painting very much in the tradition of the Nazarenes. The Nazarenes were a German Romantic group dating back to the beginning of the 19th century, very influenced by Dürer, Raphael, the Northern and Southern Renaissance. But by the 1870s, this would have been a very, very old-fashioned style. And I don't think actually that Kaufmann learned a lot from him. Trenkwald, in turn, was very critical of Isidor's drawing skills. He didn't think he had great drawing skills, but I don't think Isidor ever wanted to draw like this. It just wasn't what he was interested in. So he graduates from the Vienna Academy quite respectably, but not brilliantly. And he starts exhibiting from the early 1880s at the Vienna Künstlerhaus, which we see here. It still exists. This was the annual exhibitions were the equivalent of the Salon in Paris and the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition in London. And it was it was the main exhibiting body in Vienna, of course, until the secession was set up in 1897. And it was very, very conservative. And the lower right-hand image shows you what exhibitions at the Künstlerhaus looked like. They were very similar to what the Salon would have looked like and the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, with these pictures in heavy gold frames, frame to frame, floor to ceiling, not very, very artistic. With this kind of exhibiting, of course, you'd have very big crowds going to these exhibitions. You had to paint pictures that were in a way populist. You had to paint pictures that were going to draw the attention of the passing crowds. And so Isidor Kaufmann makes his name initially in the 1880s with with small pictures. This is quite a small picture of very anecdotal, cozy, gently humorous genre pictures of elderly gentlemen having a tipple, practicing their hobbies with a sort of gentle humor. These sort of pictures were immensely popular in the second half of the 19th century. And there was a tradition. This is Isidor Kaufmann in the middle. On either side, these are paintings by Karl Spitzweg, who is an artist in the early to middle 19th century, another Viennese artist who made a great speciality of these kind of cozy, slightly humorous pictures of middle-aged and elderly gentlemen indulging their hobbies. These pictures were produced in enormous numbers. And you can, if you pick up a Christie's or a Sotheby's catalogue of 19th century pictures, you can find them by the dozen. Picture on the right-hand side is by a French artist. I literally, when I saw this picture by Kaufmann, top left, I thought I have a big pile of old Christie's catalogues, 19th century pictures. First one I picked up, I found the image you see on the right hand side, and you can see how similar it is. These kind of pictures, they're produced in huge numbers, not very individual, sort of anonymous in a way. Here's another a typical example by Kaufmann. If this is all he painted, I wouldn't be talking to you about him today, because although they're very competent, there's nothing very special about them. This one is called "There Is No Fool Like an Old Fool," and so it's an elderly gentleman paying court to a young girl who finds him ludicrous. This was a very successful picture. It was exhibited in the 1893 Chicago World Fair and was a very popular picture on that occasion. This is also by him. I find this quite a surprising picture. This could easily have been painted for the French salon. It has a kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, naughty, sexy thing that is very typical of French salon painting of this time. And the title of this picture is The New Lady's Maid. And you can see the gentleman eyeing this young girl who's come for the job as a lady's maid, and they're sort of undressing her, really. They're looking up and down, and the viewer of the picture is invited to assess her physical charms in the same kind of way. The most popular painter of this kind of genre scene, let me see, this one of course is set in historical costume. It's set in costume of the late 18th century. This is by a French artist, Ernest Meissonier. If you're those of you who are in England, if you go to the Wallace collection, there's a good dozen paintings by him in the Wallace collection. And I think I've always said about Meissonier, because they're small pictures, that in real terms he earned more per square inch than any artist who ever lived. These pictures were immensely, immensely popular and earned him an absolute fortune. And Isidor Kaufmann is, as I said, painting very much in the same vein. Here again, more of the same. One is a French salon painter, which is the French one, and which is Isidor Kaufmann. Both of them painting set in the Empire period. In fact, it's Soulacroix, French artist, on the left, and Isidor Kaufmann on the right-hand side. So paintings of technical competence that are aiming to please a wide public. But there comes a point where I think, probably in quite a calculated way, he thought, now, how can I make a niche for myself? How can I do this kind of thing, but make it more personal and make myself recognizable? So I think he then decided to take a picture like this and to translate it into a Jewish milieu. This was not the milieu of his upbringing, but it was one that he was sympathetic to and interested in. He thought he could corner the market in this, make a special niche for himself. Some of his first attempts at Jewish subject matter, I must say, I find really quite distasteful, like this one, which is called, the title of this one is A Business Secret. And it's playing to very negative stereotypes of Jews. This particular picture was very popular, and as you can see from the right-hand side, it was published as a postcard. The 1890s, early 1900s is the golden age of the postcard. They were sent in their millions, and there were huge numbers of anti-Semitic postcards. So very, very popular at the time, and I think this is borders, to my mind, this picture borders on the anti-Semitic. This same kind of picture. Not this is again, I suppose, pandering to stereotypes of Jews as being very interested in money and being very sly and being clever in business. And this picture is called Commercial Instruction. Then he, with this, I feel a slight change of direction. This is a painting that doesn't have that kind of negative stereotyping. And the title of this picture is The Study of the Talmud and it shows a yeshiva boy being examined by his elders. And I feel there's a slightly more respectful or serious tone to this picture. This particular picture, which is called The Rabbi's Visit, was again immensely popular, and you can see again it was reproduced as a postcard that was widely distributed. And interestingly, this picture was bought by Kaiser Franz Josef. It became part of the imperial collection. And when that collection, of course, became the national collection of Austria, and then with the Anschluss in 1938, it was part of the national collection. And it was de-accessioned, of course, by the Nazis. They didn't want this as part of the national collection. It's now in America. Now, it's in the middle 1890s that we see a serious change in direction in his work, and that his work really starts to become, I think, much more interesting. And he sets out on a journey. In fact, it was actually a physical journey, because he was traveling in Galicia, in Eastern Europe, in search of his ancestry and his roots. And I think this is a wonderfully atmospheric picture, which shows the synagogue in a city called Brody. This is a painting of 1908. He's taken a few liberties. It's not quite as factual and authentic as you might think. Brody was, the Jews of Brody were assimilated. They weren't wearing kaftans and streimels. They would have worn more westernized clothes. And he's also interestingly changed the profile of the synagogue in the distance, which you can see lit up. It did not actually have a dome on top of it. For comparison, this is a painting of almost, I think it is the same year, 1908. This is a very early painting, one of the first characteristic paintings by Chagall, which again shows a Jewish community in the evening, but obviously much more fantastic in a way than the. This is the actual synagogue of Brody, how he would have seen it in the main picture, and how it was left. Obviously, all these synagogues were destroyed during the Second World War. Those are the ruins of that synagogue today. This is a painting he made of the interior of the synagogue in Brody. And this altar, which is very fascinating to me, because it's a Baroque altar, 18th century. It looks so similar to the very theatrical Baroque altarpieces you find in Catholic churches in South Germany and in Central Europe. And for comparison, this is a church I know very well, because it was the local church where I lived on the outskirts of Munich in the 1970s. This is the church of St. George in Bogenhausen. So, and you can see that of course, the synagogue doesn't have figurative statues, but otherwise, stylistically, it's really very similar to the Christian church. So this is a 16th century synagogue that he's very, very lovingly and meticulously recorded the interior and the furniture. And happily, this is one of those rare Middle or Eastern European synagogues that actually survived the Second World War. This is in a place called Jablanov. And this is Jablanov. Where was the one that's, I'm not sure where the previous one was, but it does still exist. This is Jablanov, which doesn't exist. And you can see this is the rabbi's portal with this extraordinary decoration with Hebrew texts. So these buildings, he traveled all around Galicia and Eastern Europe in search of these synagogues dating from the 16th and 17th century. They were mostly constructed out of wood, and they're the most amazing buildings. Tragically, of course, nearly all of them were destroyed. They were very, very thoroughly destroyed by the Nazis during the Second World War. If you want to get an idea of what these amazing buildings look like, there is a whole section of the Jewish Museum in Paris, in the Marais, with these wonderful scale wooden models of the old synagogues. So here is a painting of a rabbi standing in front of the rabbi's portal, and you can see how he relishes all the detail of the background and, of course, of the rabbi's costume. So he paints many pictures of Jewish rituals, Jewish ceremonies, Jewish worship. But I want to stress that he's doing it not really as a participant, but as an outside observer. Well, obviously, in strict Orthodox traditions, he shouldn't be doing this anyway, since representations of the human form were forbidden. So he's very much, in a way, an intruder in these pictures. But he's doing something that there is a parallel in the Christian tradition that you find there are many artists in the second half of the 19th century who are they're painting Christian rituals, Christian piety, Christian worship, not as participants, but as observers, as outsiders. This is a French academic artist on the left called Daniel Bouveret, and on the right a painting that Isidor Kaufmann would certainly have been very, very familiar with. This is by the German artist Wilhelm Leibl, and it shows Bavarian women at prayer in a church. And of course, Gauguin too, in the late 1880s, early 1890s, Gauguin was not a believing or practicing Christian, but he was very interested in piety and religious practices and belief. So these paintings look to be very documentary. They look to be very truthful, but he, as I've said already, he takes certain liberties, and something like this, where in worship in a synagogue, this is actually a combination of different synagogues. He made careful studies of the elements of the furniture and the wall lamp. You can see at the top there, and you can see the wall lamps here. These are actually combined from different synagogues that he studied. A number of I think, very beautiful, very poetic paintings of solitary women at prayer, and this painting shows a woman blessing the Sabbath candles, and she's in a very typical, I would say, Biedermeier interior. That's a Biedermeier bed, and the very simple furniture, no carpet on the floor, very simple elements in this picture. It is a sort of lower middle class Biedermeier interior of the 19th century. And for comparison here, bottom right hand side, another very famous Austrian artist of the mid-century. This is one of the most familiar Austrian paintings of that period. This is by Moritz von Schwind. And you can see the obvious similarities between the Jewish interior and the Christian interior. And here again, a solitary woman on the Sabbath, who's lost in reverie and religious contemplation with a Bible in front of her. Now, another thing I'd like to stress about Isidor Kaufmann is his debt to the Old Masters and his study of the Old Masters. And in Vienna, he had the collection of the Kunsthistorisches Museum, one of the greatest collections of Old Masters in the world, to visit. And so he was certainly familiar with Dutch 17th century paintings of pious women. This is an early painting by Rembrandt, or of an elderly woman who always used to be called Rembrandt's mother, but we know that actually, well, he was about 20 when he painted this picture, so I think she's far too old to have been his actual mother. Could have been his grandmother, I suppose. And this, some of you, those of you who are in London, may have had the chance to see earlier this year the very delightful exhibition of the Rembrandt pupil Nicholas Mace, who also painted several pictures of women lost in religious contemplation and piety. If you follow through the paintings of Isidor Kaufmann, you will find very often same tables, the same chairs, the same pieces of furniture, the same clocks, same mirrors turning up in pictures. Again, they're obviously props in his studio, and he actually donated many of these to a museum in Vienna, the Stadtmuseum in Vienna, in the early 1900s, to create a Jewish interior. And that's what you see in the black and white photograph on the right hand side. Now I'm going to concentrate on portraits, and this seems to me where he achieves greatness. Not perhaps in the portraits of young women, beautiful though they are. The girl on the right hand side is probably his, we think it's, or they, the experts think it's his daughter Marie Paulina, but she's dressed up, of course, as an Orthodox Jew, which she wasn't. So in this picture she's wearing a wig, and she's wearing this wonderful headdress with pearls. But you feel that beautiful though they are, I think these pictures of young women, he seems to be perhaps more interested in their clothing and costume than he is in them as individual human beings. And again, there are anachronisms. In this one, for instance, the Torah text that's behind her is apparently something that would only be found in the male zone of a synagogue, and it would be unlikely to see a woman posed in front of it. To me, it's the paintings of the men and the children that are most remarkable. And they just have such an extraordinary presence. As with the greatest portraitists, you feel that you are confronted with a human being. You really have to sort of remember, oh, this is actually just paint on a piece of canvas, because they seem so alive, so real. They're really, I mean, they're not necessarily beautiful people or nice people. A lot of them have give you quite an uncomfortable feeling. They're quite challenging. They have a psychological complexity. And there was, of course, again, a great prototype for this in the work of Rembrandt, particularly in the 1640s, when Rembrandt moved into the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam, and he made many portraits of his Jewish neighbors. These two paintings are Rembrandt's from the 1640s, and painted with incredible empathy, I think. I mean, he's not flattering them. That neither of these men could be described as beautiful or even particularly likable. But Rembrandt is really interested in them as individual human beings. And I feel that with these Isidor Kaufmann paintings. I mean, these are all people they're real people. And I'm going to, and very beautiful, meticulously painted, wonderful painting of the fabrics. Very interested in the costume, and marvelous rendering of silks and fur, and very often using these flat, very decorative backgrounds that are parallel to the picture surface. This young man, he's clearly a portrait again of an individual who apparently belongs to a more liberal and modernized version of Orthodox Jewry, because his hair is short and his little temple locks are quite short. And again, with a lot of these portraits, I feel that he's been inspired by artists of the past, particularly of the Italian Renaissance. So this is Isidore Kaufmann on the left, and this is the great Renaissance painter Parmigianino on the right-hand side. This is Rosso Fiorentino on the left, and Isidore Kaufmann on the right. It's quite a, he's challenging some of the greatest artists of the past by making such an obvious comparison. And I think he comes out pretty well, actually, of the comparison. Again, Parmigianino on the left-hand side, Isidore Kaufmann on the right-hand side, and children. This one, I mean, Sue will know what I'm. We have a mutual friend, which is how we know each other. Very, very dearly loved friend, and she has a grandson that she adores. I suppose every Jewish grandmother adores her grandchildren, and this could be a portrait of him. This incredible kind of candid, extraordinarily mature, appraising gaze in a young child. This is so uncannily like our friend's grandson. It's positively spooky. Now, I tend not to like paintings of children because artists so often paint sentimental, sweet and sentimental versions of children. One of the things I think is so wonderful about Isidore Kaufmann is there is not a trace of sentimentality. He treats children like he treats the adults. Here, for comparison, this is a notorious painting by the English artist John Everett Millais called Bubbles. I mean, nauseatingly cute and sentimental. Look at this sharp, smart, appraising little boy by Isidore Kaufmann on the left-hand side, and the way that they meet your eyes, they don't flirt with you in the way that cute paintings of children by Greuze do, for instance. These are fully formed personalities, these little boys, and this is his son, Edouard. Again, of course, he's not actually, he wasn't, of course, an Orthodox Jewish boy. He was from an assimilated family. He's just dressed up to look like one. Now, one of the questions that I always get asked in these lectures is, did the protagonist have children? Well, I know that Sue probably knows better than me, but I know he had 3 children. He had 2 sons and a daughter. And one of his sons, this is Philip Kaufmann, also became an artist. And we see him in his studio, and we can see it again from the way he's dressed and from the kind of pictures he paints, and that he is totally assimilated and is not an Orthodox Jew. Now, he, like his father, he applied to the Vienna Academy. I think it's 1907, and that is a very significant date because it's the same year that 2 other notable or notorious young students applied to the Academy. One of them was Adolf Hitler, who painted this watercolor. Adolf Hitler was rejected. He was actually rejected twice by Professor Griepenperl, who accepted both Philipp Kaufmann, and he also accepted Egon Schiele. Of course, a lot of people have asked what would have happened if Hitler had not been rejected by the Vienna Academy. The whole world might have had a very different 20th century. But as you can see, this is pretty amateurish and pretty inept. Philipp Kaufmann went on to have he's an accomplished artist, he's a skilled artist, nothing at all to do with what his father was doing, either thematically nor stylistically. And he doesn't really look a very German or Austrian artist. It's very clear that his main influences were French, and that he's familiar with the French Impressionists. This is quite an interesting comparison. This is the only portrait, the only image I could find of a portrait by him later in life when he was forced to emigrate and he came to Britain. He did earn a living as a kind of jobbing portraitist. I think this is quite a fine picture painted during the First World War of a soldier. And for comparison, on the right-hand side, a portrait of a soldier from the same date by Egon Schiele. And Sue sent me this. I'm a little bit frustrated that it's only half the picture, because this really looks very good to me. I like this. It's a view of London with St. Paul's in the background, and I think you can see the spire of St. Bride's Church in the middle of the picture, quite loosely painted, a very impressionist technique, very accomplished. I think this is a very attractive picture. And more examples of the work of Philipp Kaufmann. And so I think this is where I'm going to come to a close for today. Is that my last? Oh, this is as you can see, quite a flower piece by Philipp Kaufmann, painted with considerable panache. He seems to be going beyond Impressionism here and approaching something close to Expressionism. But I'm going to come out of my share now, and we're going to see if we have